In the 1930s, a man named Vernon had a brother named Vester. Vernon was dating a girl named Cletus. His brother dated her sister named Gladys. This connection? Vernon broke up with Cletus, and Vester broke up with Gladys. Connection. Vernon started dating Gladys, and Vester started dating Cletus. Vernon married Gladys. Connect. In 1935, they had twin boys, but unfortunately one of the boys died. The one that lived, his name was Elvis. And on Elvis's 11th birthday, he asked for a bicycle or a rifle, but instead he got a guitar, which he wasn't too thrilled with. But he learned to play and to sing. Most people thought he really wasn't very good until 1953, when someone noticed he was really different and really good. Also, I was born in 1953 in Mount Vernon, Illinois. Fast forward, Elvis became the single greatest catalyst for rock music in the world. History records that until Elvis, there was no single thing that unified the youth culture of America. Elvis was the connector of a youth culture. He had millions of fans. Fast forward, one of those fans was a girl named Dee Gallen. After Elvis died, she decided to connect his fans and opened up a museum called Memories in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Memories had a theater where Elvis impersonators could do shows to continue to connect Elvis's fans to Elvis's music. Meanwhile, there was a man named Henry Lingenfelter who wanted to connect students to God by doing events. As he searched for a building to house his events, he found the Memories Theater. One Christmas in the late 80s, he booked the Memories Theater and hosted an event where he invited as his main speaker Andy Stanley. That same week, Lanny Donoho was in Gatlinburg doing a conference and heard that Andy Stanley was the speaker at Memories. The speaker for Lanny's camp was Rick Stanley, who happened to be Elvis's half-brother and had the same last name as Andy. Lanny went to hear Andy and invited Andy to come to see his camp. We had never had a speaker like Andy, and Andy had never had a camp like ours. This began the start of some incredible connections. Andy and I decided to do camps together, to connect. We needed a musician, so we got a friend of mine named David to play music at our Good Stuff conferences. We needed another speaker for the times Andy couldn't go, so we asked Andy's old friend, Louie, to come and be our speaker when Andy couldn't be there. Long time connection going way back. We needed more musicians, so David's friend Candy began to sing with us. Connections are building. Good Stuff changed to Big Stuff, and we needed more musicians. Candy had a brother named Rick, who did a perfect Elvis impersonation. Rick began to sing at Big Stuff. Meanwhile, I moved to Atlanta. Andy started a new church in Atlanta. David moved to Atlanta. Rick moved to Atlanta. Louie moved to Atlanta. Reggie moved to Atlanta. Reggie and Lanny started Kid Stuff, which of course was named after Big Stuff. David played music at Kid Stuff. Andy, Lanny, and Louie all ended up living right down the road from each other on Providence Road. And speaking of Providence, think about these connections. Rick left camp sick one summer, and we found out that he had cancer. I stopped by our church on the way to the hospital to see Rick and met a man from Uganda named Peterson Sozi. He asked if he could go with me to the hospital to pray for Rick. Peterson and I connected during that visit. Rick left this earth, and we had his memorial service on September 12th of that year. One day I watched Oprah, whose father's name was also Vernon, as she took shoes over to give to African children, which made me want to take our interns to Africa, which eventually caused Andy to want to go to Africa, after which I felt like I was supposed to start a ministry in Africa. Meanwhile, a guy in our church, Kurt, whom I did not know, had taken his family to do a mission trip in Uganda, and while there ran into Peterson Sozi, who asked Kurt if he knew Lanny Donoho. He knew me because I had helped get North Point Community Church started through Kid Stuff. So he came back and called me and wanted to help create our new ministry in Africa. Meanwhile, we kept doing camps, and I met a girl named Jessie Guerin, who was fighting cancer herself while she was loving God. And Louie, who was speaking at camp, found out about Jessie and changed his message when he heard her story and went out in the audience and presented one of the most powerful nights Big Stuff ever experienced as he stood beside Jessie Guerin and talked about how her cancer was a megaphone for God. 2 years later, Jessie left this earth and her life was celebrated on September the 12th, just as Rick's had been. Both impacted Big Stuff in a big, big way. Meanwhile, I asked Kurt to get a team together to help create in our Kenyan ministry a children's choir. That choir's name was to be Daraja, which in Swahili means bridge. A bridge is what connects. The choir is here because I knew Kurt, because I met Peterson, because I met Rick, because I met Candy, because I met David, because I met Andy, because he met Henry, because he met Dee, because she had a theater named Memories, which featured the music of the second twin born to Vernon and Gladys in 1935. And oh, by the way, the son of Vernon and Gladys who didn't survive when Elvis did, his name was Jesse Garin Presley. So I guess if you wanted to thank someone for the Daraja Choir being here, you might thank Vernon for getting Elvis a guitar instead of a bicycle or a rifle on his 11th birthday.